This conference will now be recorded.
Anna, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Lori. I'm going to get started now because I've got another place to be when I'm
Okay.
done with this. You'll
All right.
notice the first thing that I like to talk about when I do this is just point out how good real estate is as an investment, just in general. So this purchase a house versus renting, and I upgraded some of the numbers to make them a little more practical from the one that I did 3 or 4 or 5 years ago on this. Let's say you own a house that's worth $225,000. Now, I don't normally recommend buying a house like this as an investment, but as you go through life and accumulate houses, keeping a few houses is a good thing for your retirement program. So I'm going to go through this example fairly quickly. If you rent a house for $1,400 a month, that's worth in the low 200s, which is probably about right. And if it goes up 2% a year, the rent goes up, you will have paid almost $700,000 in 30 years and you will have nothing to show for it. If you buy the same house at 4% interest, the principal and interest is going to be just barely above the 1,400 at 4% for 30 years. The total cost to purchase the house is $225,000 plus the interest is $312,000, and I even put a couple $1,000s a year aside for maintenance. So it costs you $597,000 to own the house versus $690,000 to rent it. So already you're $92,000 ahead. If you're in the 20% tax bracket, you can write off the interest you pay on the house and the real estate taxes, quite frankly, which I didn't think I even included here. So you save an extra $62,000 in taxes over the next 30 years. So far you're up 150 grand. But here's where it gets really cool. If your house goes up 2% a year, when you're done, you have a $560,000 asset. And if it goes up the way they've been going up, a crummy 3% a year, you have a $700,000 asset. You have, you will have a 2%. It's $409,000, and if at 3%, it's $550,000. And then you add up all the other good things, the savings over the rent and the tax break, and somewhere between $564,000 and $700,000. That's pretty darn good investment. If you got to live someplace, you might as well be your own landlord. So that's the first thing I want people to understand. The second thing I want people to understand is what a typical duplex deal looks like. Now, I'm going to ask you if you've got your papers in front of you. Hi, Caitlin. I got your numbers, but there's something I want to do after this class, and I will go over those numbers and talk to you either later tonight or first thing in the morning, if that's all right, to analyze, because it's going to take a little time on my part to analyze what you handed me. Okay, Kate. Okay. Kate over in Waynesboro has a client that's looking at an apartment complex, and we're going to analyze it for her at some point, or I'm gonna. So if you go to, you'll see there's the third page deep in this thing. It says investment property basic questions number 2 in the upper right hand corner. I want you to look down at the bottom of that page and you'll see something called the 100 months rent rule, GRM. That means gross rent multiplier. Here is a quick and dirty way to analyze a lot of investment properties. Duplexes, shopping centers, office buildings, it all works the same. You figure out what the monthly rent is and you multiply it times 100. Now, if the tenants are not paying their own utilities, you need to back some money out for that. But if the tenants pay their own utilities, if I've got a duplex that brings in $1,500 a month on one side and $1,500 a month on the other side, $1,500 plus $1,500 is $3,000. Times 100, it's worth $300,000. That's the 100 times rent rule, or the gross rent multiplier of 100. Now, in Charlottesville, the gross rent multiplier rule has gotten a little out of hand. There are people paying as much as 140 times rent for properties. There's a real shortage of them, and people are paying a premium for them. I don't like doing that. But if you got to go 110 or 115 or even 120 times rent to get a real good property in really good condition and a good location, go ahead and do it. But if somebody tells you they want to sell their duplex and it brings in $3,000 a month, and they want $500,000 or $600,000 for them, that's 175 to 200 times rent. You know immediately, because you can do that math in your head, that's a bad deal. Okay, so don't do it. You know, the idea of this class is to teach you how to understand a good deal from a bad deal quickly, like a pro, like I do. Somebody wants $400,000 for a duplex that brings in $200,000 a month. I immediately can do in my head, that's 200 times rent, and I'm not paying 200 times rent, and nobody else is either. Okay. Do notice that investors have different kinds of goals. This is also at the bottom of this page 2 thing. Do they want to flip it? Do they want long-term wealth building? Do they want tax shelter? Do they want positive cash flow? Some combination of that. And then I put in parentheses, you don't have to live in it. I've had so many investors who I thought didn't know what they were doing say, well, I'd never buy a property that I wouldn't live in myself. And I say, well, then you're missing out on a lot of opportunities, because if you're living in a refrigerator box underneath a bridge, a beat up single wide trailer is a castle to you. I made a lot of money with trailers and double wides and stuff, because it gives somebody an opportunity to get off the streets and have a decent place to live. And so you don't have to be ashamed if you're selling somebody, you know, an inexpensive house, because to the buyer of that house, it's a castle. It's their way out of the projects, or it's a way off the street. So don't be shy about helping people get that first house, no matter what, because as they improve in life, they'll remember you helped them. So don't worry about it if you wouldn't live in it yourself. That's right. You help somebody get the first house. We'll come back to page 2 now in just a second, but I wanted to get that 100-month rent rule thing in here. Now we're going to go back to the second page, the typical duplex deal. So let us say we found this magical duplex for $200,000, and I've rounded everything up to 200,000. And we're gonna the seller's going to pay our closing costs, and we're going to put 20% down. Pretty typical real estate deal. So we're going to have a mortgage payment. PITI is going to be $1,059. The rent is going to be $950 a side. You see, that's almost my 100 months rent rule. That's about 105 times rent. We're going to have some other expenses, you know, fixing things up and vacancies and replacing the carpet and the toilet every now and then. So in my typical duplex deal here, I'm going to have the income coming in is going to be around $1,330, and I'm going to pay my mortgage payment. So I'm going to have $271 worth of positive cash flow each month that I can go down to Walmart and spend on groceries. So that gives me $3,200 a year. Now my mortgage pay down, the tenants are going to pay my mortgage down $2,360, which increases my net worth by $2,360. That's a good deal for me, the landlord. If my property goes up 2% a year, my value of my building goes up by $4,000. So my balance sheet and my net worth goes up $4,000. And then I can depreciate my building. I got a $200,000 duplex. I'm going to arbitrarily or semi-arbitrarily assign $40,000 to the land, so I can depreciate $160,000 of the value of the building. Now, when I made this example up, the IRS said I could depreciate my building over 31 and a half years. Well, I can't do that now. It's 28 and a half years. So actually I would get a little better tax savings. But just so if you don't know what depreciation is, it's the artificial decline of something. Like if you're in the farming business and your trailer wears out, you get to write the tractor off. I meant tractor. If your tractor wears out, you get to write the tractor off. So if the government says it's got a 10-year useful life, you can write 1/10 of that tractor off as a loss every year. Well, what does that mean? That means if I write off $5,000 against my $50,000 tractor, the first $5,000 worth of corn that I sell that year is tax free. So if I'm in the 25% tax bracket, I'm going to save $1,270. In taxes. I'm going to depreciate that. So I take the benefits of owning the property and I add them up, and I get $10,882 worth of benefits. You remember I put $40,000 down. So I divide that by my investment. And what do I have? I get 27% return on my money. Not too bad. That's a fairly typical duplex deal, and that's how you break it down and explain it. Okay? Now there's a new page in this thing, and it's called the capitalization method page. This is the way I'm going to approach Kate's apartment building. And this is the way people that are more sophisticated approach bigger complexes. Now, don't forget this 100 months rent rule or 110 months rent rule still works too. But this is the way that the big boys do it. And if you've had my real estate class, you have seen this before, believe me, because I've reduced the math in the Mosley course to be in a very simplistic method. But this is how you analyze like an apartment building. So let us pretend that I have a building or a group of buildings or a duplex or fourplex or something that has a $30,000 a year, always do it by the year, $30,000 a year net operating income, which means after all my expenses are paid, we pretend I paid cash for the building, I got no mortgage. After all my expenses are made, how much cash is left? And the answer is, in this case, in this example, it's $30,000. Let us say my investor wants a 7% return. That's the teeny tiny number over on the far right column. If they want a 7% return, I convert the 7% to 0.07, and I divide the teeny tiny number into the middle sized number, and I get a great big number, $428,571. So if my investor wants a 7% return and the $30,000 is an accurate amount of money for the net operating income, I divide by 0.07, and I can pay $428,000 and change for that building. Now let's use the same example because I want you to see the effect of this. And let's say my investor is only looking for a 6% return. Well, if he's willing to take a lower return, I can pay more money for the building, right? So if I take the same $30,000 net operating income and divide this time by 0.06, I can pay up to $5,000 for that building and still get a 6% return. Well, let's take it a step further. Let's say my investor's greedier. I want an 8% return. We take the same $30,000 net operating income, but now we're dividing it by 0.08. I can only pay $375,000 for that building for that cash flow and still get an 8% return. So you see how this is how an appraiser values buildings, is he finds out what the going rate of return is for a duplex or a fourplex by analyzing what other people in that area pay. And then he takes the net operating income of his subject property and he divides that rate of return in the form of a decimal into that cash flow, and he can determine the value of any building on the planet. as long as he knows what the investors in that area want, and as long as he has an accurate description of what the NOI is. Now, let's say
So the
somebody's,
decimal number, oh, sorry, is that the cap rate then, the decimal number?
the cap rate is the 7% return. You're,
Okay,
you're going to hear people, say stuff like, well, what's the cap on this building? 6.5%, that kind of thing. Let me,
and that's to say what it's currently netting you.
that's to say, if you buy it for this amount of money with this, well, here you're one step ahead of me. Let
Okay.
us say that somebody says to you, I have a building and I want $600,000 for it. And the first thing I'm going to say is, well, what's your NOI? You're going to say, I bring in $45,000 a year after my expenses. So look what I do now to get the cap rate. It's a reverse problem. I divide, and it's right here on my sheet. I divide the 600,000 is what the asking price is. I divide the 600,000 into 45,000, and I get the teeny tiny number 0.075 or 7.5%. So that deal is a 7.5% cap rate. $600,000 building that has a net operating income of 45,000 yields a 7.5% cap rate. Now let's take the same building, a $600,000 building, but this time it brings in more income. The net operating income on this next example is $50,000. All right, I divide 600,000 into 50,000, and that yields me 8.33%. Because you see, the price is the same, but the income is higher, therefore the return is higher. And if I want to check somebody out, if somebody says to me, I'm going to sell you a building at 9% return for $600,000, you say, get your tax return out, and you multiply 0.09 times 600, and you get 54,000, and you better be able to look at his tax return and see net operating income on 123 Park Street or wherever the building address is. It needs to be 54,000. Otherwise, he's lying to you. That's how you check them. Okay?
Okay.
So now you know how to do this. So now you know something you didn't know yesterday, the way the big boys do analyzing property. Now, I'm back to the investment property basic pages thing. It says 2 on the top of it. These are some questions that I might ask an investor who just first came to me and says, I got some investment property and I may want to do some business with you. What kind of questions would you ask them? So I kind of threw together a bunch of questions that I would ask people. How many units have you got? What's the mix? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom? How many baths? What's the age of the buildings? What are they made out of? Brick, vinyl, wood? Wood needs a lot of maintenance. Brick lasts forever. Usually built in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, though. How are they metered? Man, that's real important. What's included in the rent and what isn't? Do you have any other income sources? Laundries, concessions. What's your vacancy rate? The vacancy rate, we don't have any turnover here. Maybe your rents are too low. Are all the tenants current? What's the quality and condition of the construction? Do you have hardwood floors, carpet, tile? You know, you're going to be replacing carpet every 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's a big expense. What are the age and types of appliances? Do the tenants own their own appliances or do you provide them? Hate to buy a building and have everybody take their stove and refrigerator with them when they go. Do any of the units have washer dryers? For people that go to the laundromat, a washer dryer has got to be worth what, 50 or 100 bucks a month extra in rent? Would be to me, certainly. What's the age of the roof and the age of the HVAC systems? Those are your big expenses, guys. When you own rental properties, you've got to put a roof on or a new heat pump in it. What's the condition of the plumbing and wiring? Do you have cable, internet, or is it a data-ready kind of building? Or are you still doing dial up there or something? That'll hurt your tenancy a lot. Do you have a bunch of rules, like can people do grilling on their decks or on their patios or balconies? Do you have good parking? Is there room for expansion? I know a friend of mine bought 4 units and we took a good look at the property and there was room to put up another 8-unit building. We got the land underneath it for free. Whoopee. Are there long-term tenants and are they paying below market rents? And here's another thing. When somebody brings you a deal and they want 175, 200 times rent, I would say, why don't you figure out, why don't you sell me on this deal? Why would I want to buy your deal? Because if you're willing to pay 175 times rent, I can find you terrible deals all over Charlottesville right now. They're terrible deals out there just waiting to be had by some sucker like you. So you tell me why somebody would invest in your building at the price you're asking and see if they can sell you. Sell me on the deal you're going to asking me to represent. Okay, if you've been in my Mosley class, this next page on leverage is not unfamiliar to you, but I will go through it again. Assume we have $1 million to spend on an apartment building. Because of the 100 months rent rule, that means I need to be getting $10,000 a month in rent. That's $120,000 a year. I'm going to have some taxes and insurance and other expenses, so I just quasi-arbitrarily chose 30% expenses. So since I paid cash for this building, I've got $84,000 in positive cash flow. I can go buy a new Porsche or something with that. I have no mortgage pay down though, because I don't have a mortgage. I do get appreciation on one building, $1 million, 2% is $20,000 a year. And I get to depreciate not the whole $1 million. In this case, I chose $800,000 for the value of the building itself. I applied the 31.5 years for this example, even though I believe it's now been changed to 28.5. And my client is in the 25% tax bracket, so he saves $6,349. I add up the benefits, divide by my investment. This is the cap rate thing that we just did, kind of analysis, but this is called an internal rate of return analysis. If I wanted to do just a cap rate analysis, I'd divide the $1 million into $84,000, and that would give me the cap rate for that property. But it doesn't give me the internal rate of return for the whole project because remember, you make 4 ways: appreciation, depreciation, cash flow, and mortgage pay down are the 4 things you get in a real estate deal that make you richer. So now let's go down to the bottom half of the page and say we got the same $1 million, but instead we buy 5 identical buildings that all bring in $10,000 a month apiece. And we're going to get a 25-year loan at 5% interest. Very reasonable numbers. So I'm going to rent these properties out, but instead of only bringing in $120,000, I'm going to bring in $600,000. I'm still going to have my 30% expenses just like up above, which gives me a $420,000 cash flow. But unlike the other project, I've got a mortgage to pay down. And the payments on the mortgage are $280,600, which gives me my net or my true cash flow that I have to go buy Porsches with. Look at that, it's $139,400. It's even more than when I bought one because now I have 5, even though I have 5 mortgage payments to make. So I've computed what my first year mortgage pay down is on these $5 million worth of buildings, and it's $82,500. So far, I got $139,400 in cash flow. My net worth has just gone up $82,500. The appreciation at 2% on my 5 buildings now is $100,000 that my net worth goes up, and I get $31,700 worth of write-off against my rent. If I take my total benefits, $353,600, and divide by 1 million, it triples my return. Now I get 35%. And that's the effect of leverage by borrowing and using other people's money. Now, of course, if your buildings are vacant all the time and they're half vacant, you're going to have trouble just making your mortgage payments. But if you keep your buildings full and you chose wisely, you can do a really great job on leveraging your return. In the first example, if your building's half empty, you're not going to have a lot of cash, but you're not going to go broke and lose your buildings. But if your buildings are 70 or 80% vacant and you bought 5 of them, you're probably going to go down the tubes and lose your money and declare bankruptcy. So there's more risk involved using leverage, but the rewards are great too. And most real estate investors use leverage to their advantage. The the next page is about 1031 exchanges. These are really, really valuable if you're dealing with investors. If investors own property in another part of the country and they want to bring their money here, if they sell the property where they have it, they've got to usually pay a large tax bill, and then they come here with a lot less money to invest. By using IRS code 1031, you can fix that. This is an example of an exchange that I did 20 some years ago, probably maybe even a little more than that, with a submarine captain who was stationed in San Diego. And of course, these numbers are tiny compared to what the numbers would be now, but remember, this is 20 or 25 years ago. So Jerry and Connie Hudson had a house that they bought in California for $200,000. Jerry got transferred out, so they turned it and converted it to a rental property, and it went up in value while they had it to $600,000. While they were renting it, they depreciated it down to the value of the land, which was $50,000. So they had, when they sell that property, a potential taxable gain. They would have to pay taxes on $550,000, which would be their gain, taxable gain. And if they're in the 25% tax bracket, they would have to write a check to the IRS for $137,500. That would indeed break your heart. And you would only have $137,500 less to invest than the $600,000. You would have had $462,000 to invest. But here's what we did. Jerry sold the property and identified the sale as a 1031 exchange. Here's your new vocabulary words for the night. Write these down, because if you want to impress your investors, they will know this language. You need to know it too. The property in California that Jerry and Connie sold is called the relinquished property. The money that they got when they sold the property is called the boot. Like it's on your foot, a boot, the boot. The boot is given not to Jerry, not to Jerry's attorney, but given to a person who's a disinterested third party who holds the money, like an escrow agent, and that person is called a qualified intermediary. He holds the $600,000. So now Jerry and Connie come to Charlottesville, and Jerry goes to his duty station, and Connie and I get in the car and we go driving around, and it's like buying monopoly properties. Connie says, "Oh, I think I'll take this one." And, "Oh, I like that one. I'll take that one." And she spends $600,000. Now, here's a good thing. And by the way, she instructs the qualified intermediary which properties to buy, and then they buy them in Jerry and Connie's name. And they get to spend not $462,000 is what they would have had to reinvest if they paid the taxes due. But by doing the exchange, I have all $600,000 to invest. So they get to buy $600,000 worth of stuff. About 2 years ago, we paid off the last property in that exchange. They bought it for 112. We sold it for 275, and they never did anything to it. So that was pretty interesting. Whenever you do a 1031 exchange, if you represent the buyer, you be sure to put time is of the essence in the contract, because here's the deal, you've got 45 days to identify what replacement properties you're going to buy. That's the properties Jerry and Connie buy here. They sell the relinquished property and they buy replacement properties here. So they have 45 days from when the relinquished property closes to determine which properties they're going to buy. And they have a total of 180 days to close on that property. Now, here's the problem. If you're getting ready to close on the property and it's the middle of February and the seller gets snowed in skiing in Killington, Vermont, and the power goes out on the East Coast and there's 4 feet of snow every place, and the seller there's no way that he can sign the deed, and you go over on your exchange, you're going to lose the benefit of that $137,500 tax savings. And if you don't have time is of the essence in there, you can't sue anybody for that. But if you've got time is of the essence in there, you can sue them for that, and you would sue them for that. So make sure you got time is of the essence in that thing. Okay. There's another thing about 1031 exchanges that you should know for estate planning. They say nothing's certain except for death and taxes. Well, you can cheat the tax guy on your 1031 properties. Unfortunately, though, you got to die to do it. But when you die, and you have people inherit your property, like your family members inherit the property, they get to start writing off the depreciation at the new current value. So in other words, if Jerry's property went from 200,000 to 600,000, and he bought $600,000 worth of properties here, and 10 years later he died and they were worth $1 million, his kids could say, all right, we got $1 million, now we can start depreciating all over again. So for estate planning, it's great because your kids get the property not at the old value of when you purchased them, but at the current value from when you pass away. So that's important. The next page in this presentation has to do with an example of an apartment building. There was a fellow in Waynesboro that went through my real estate class, and as soon as he got his license, some guys approached him to sell some investment property, and he had no clue what he was doing. And I said to myself, well, if I'm going to teach him, I might as well design a course and teach everybody, because investment property deals are very cool. Because if you get 5 or 6 investors that buy 10 houses a year from you, guess what? You're having a good year starting January 1st. You don't have to worry about where your income's coming from. You just got to worry about finding good deals for people. So this is an example of a deal that these guys brought to him. And I want, with the little that you've already learned, I want you to understand how this all fits together. So the guy's got a building. It's an old brick building, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath in each unit. Brick construction, original windows, hardwood floors. You get the idea. I just sold one down there, 4th unit, that looks just like this. Firewall between them, old and new furnaces. So here's some things that bothered me. They paid $590,000 for this thing, and they had positive cash flow except for last year when a few tenants left without notice. Well, there was a guy in my first year, couple of years in real estate, he said, if you put enough cash down, anything will have a positive cash flow. You know, you remember what you learned earlier about like the 100 months rent rule? Let's play along and see what we got here. So notice that the current rents is $775, but they've rented for $795 in the past. Well, boy, runs up a red flag. Why the rent's going down instead of up? And then they have other properties. All that stuff is just blowing smoke. But here's the deal. If the current rent, what we found out after doing a little examination, if the rent is $775, but I found out that they're paying $172 a month in utilities. So I got to subtract that out. So that's $603 a month. And there's 8 of them. So that's $4,824 a month. Who wants to tell me what that building's worth with those numbers? $4,824 a month. What do you do, guys? Times what number? Times 100, right? Gross rent multiplier. Well, that means this building's worth $482,000. They paid $590 for it. It gets worse. The next year, 2014, the average rent, when we looked at their P&L statement, at their tax returns and stuff, the average rent for the units was $618. So it wasn't even the $775 they were talking about. Plus, they were paying $157 a unit for utilities. Well, that's a net of $461 rent. There's 8 units. That's $3,688. Guys, times 100, what is that? $368,000, right? And they want $590, $600, $700,000 for this turkey? I don't think so. Now, do you see how easy that was when you know what you're doing? All this complicated stuff goes, you just break it down to how much is it a month times how much net rent do you get a month from each unit? Add that up for a monthly total. Multiply by 100, 110, even 115. In Charlottesville, like I said, they're getting crazy. They're going 140, but none of my investors are going that high. But this is a dog. This is a terrible, terrible thing. When you analyze the real income they're bringing in, they want you to pay $600,000, $700,000 for a building. In my opinion, it's worth 400 tops. And look how long it took to do that. You can do it in 60 seconds once you get good at it, once you get used to it. You have a great starting point to know what's going on. Okay? So there you go as far as that's concerned. That's how to analyze quickly an apartment building. Now, flipping property is very popular these days. I like to flip modestly priced houses because there's very little risk. The more money you tie up, the more money you pay out in expenses during a month, the faster it eats the daylights out of your profit. But I know people that are making excellent returns flipping properties in the $350,000 to $500,000, $600,000 range. But to me, that's a little risky. We've been flipping them in the 100 to 200 range mostly. They're hard to find. You got to go out in the country to find them, but they fly off the shelves when you want to sell them. You rarely have to hold them for any amount of time at all. So here's how I want you to think about doing a flip. You always work backwards on a flip. So let's say you identify a property, it's probably a fixer-upper that might work as a flip. Now, how do you start thinking about it? By far, the absolute most important thing is you have to determine what it will sell for when you've done the repairs on it. And if you don't know that, if you can't identify that amount, you're not ready to do flips yet, because that's the secret to the whole thing. And I don't want you to think, well, I'm going to buy low and sell high. Nope. I want you to buy very, very low and sell at low retail. You don't have to hit, if you've got to find some sucker to make any money on the deal, don't do it. It's not a good enough deal. I tell people, my investors, a deal of a lifetime comes around about every 3 or 4 months. If you get out there and beat the bushes, the deal of a lifetime comes along around every 3 or 4 months. So just tell them to be patient, keep their powder dry, keep their money where they can get to it. Because when you find a good one, they're going to have to pull the trigger, and they're going to have to pull the trigger fast. So figure out what it will sell at low retail for, not buy high, sell low, or vice versa, not buy low and sell high. Buy very, very low and be able to sell at low retail. Now, what else do I have to consider? Well, what are my closing costs going to be when I sell it? Well, I got to pay a realtor commission probably. I got to pay a grantor's tax. I got to hire my attorney. I might have to do a little fix up. So all of this stuff is important. What are my closing costs when I buy? I got to record the deed of trust, might need a survey, need title insurance, need an attorney to close the deal for me. I may have to pay some loan fees. You got to figure out what all that stuff is. Then also figure out it's probably going to take you, by the time you do the rehab, get it all fixed up, get it on the market, get it sold and get it closed, you're probably going to need 6 months worth of carrying costs, 6 months worth of interest. So subtract that out of the deal. Now, the next thing is, how much profit do I want to make? You don't do these things to break even. You know, on a deal that's only 100 grand, between 100 and 200 grand, 20 or 30,000 is a decent profit. If you're going to do something and tie up 500,000, I'd want to make at least 50, I think, maybe more. So is the risk worth the reward? So get your profit number in there, because that's going to, all these numbers added up. You know, you subtract these numbers from what you think you can get for it, and that'll give you the top number you can pay for it. And then the last but not least, what's it going to cost to fix this turkey up? And if you're new at this, I put a note here that says, if you're new, add 25% because you're wrong. Okay? You just are. You're not going to get it right the first few times. So add another 20, 25% until you've done 4 or 5 of them and you really kind of get to know what you're talking about. And then and only then can you determine what you can pay for it. And if you're at an auction or something like that, or if you're in a bidding situation, I'm telling you, don't get wrapped up in this thing and bid way more than what this number is, because you're going to lose money on the end. You make your money on the front end.
25. Oh, sorry.
What? Go ahead.
Would you also add 25% to a contractor's quotes just for any unforeseen circumstances?
I don't know what you mean by a contractor's quote.
So with some of my investors, what I've been doing is I work pretty closely with a contractor in the area. And when one of my investors is interested, I'll bring the contractor to look at the property and to write up a quote for the repairs.
Okay, here's how I handle that.
Okay.
If I will go out on a job with a contractor, and they'll be looking around and everything, and I'm going to say, how many hours do you think it's going to take to do this? And they say, well, it's going to take, or how many days, full days is it going to take to do this? Let's say they say 20 days. I say, how many people are you going to need? Well, it'll be me and 2 helpers. So you got a $15 an hour helper, $20 an hour helper, and maybe a $40 an hour contractor. And I mean, and I don't hire the most expensive contractors in the world, because I manage a job and I watch them. So if I'm paying the lead carpenter or something $40 an hour, and I'm paying one of his lackeys 20 and another one 15, that's what, 40, 60, $75 an hour times an 8-hour day times 20 days. That's my labor cost. So when we need materials, I go meet them at Lowe's at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning with a checkbook from my client. And I say, all right, let's get the materials we need for the next 4 or 5 days. We buy the materials, I write the check right there on the spot. Now, if it takes them, they quoted me 20 days to finish the job. So, you know, just do the math, 75 times 8 times 20. So my labor costs are going to be 75 times
12 grand.
75 a day times 5 days a week for 20 days. So my labor cost on that job is $7,500. If they finish it in 15 days, 16 days, they still get $7,500. If they take 25 days, guess what? They still get $7,500. So I can control the labor costs on the job, and I've always done it that way. And I buy the materials. So I know they're not throwing skill saws and, stuff that, that they're carting away from the job that we don't need, that, it's not going into my job, and I'm not paying for their latest new tool and stuff like that. So that's how I control the costs of my flips. That's been a method that works for me. If you get to a point where you've got a contractor that's just excellent, that you work well with, you may not have to do that kind of scrutiny, but that's the way I've always controlled the work on my clients' jobs. And I'm pretty hands-on. I mean, I don't sit there all day and watch them work, but I do meet them a couple times a week, and I do stop by the job site to make sure, first of all, that somebody's even there doing something. And I mean, I'll call the client, I'll call the contractor up and say, how's work coming today? Oh yeah, we're down here hammering it out. I see, you damn liar, I was just on the job site. If you ever lie to me again, you're fired. And trust me, I would rather the guy say, Pat, I'm so hungover, I'm throwing up, I'm commode hung and drunk. I'm saying, fine, see you tomorrow. I'd much rather hear that than some smoke about, yeah, I'm on the job site today, and I go, you lie? Because if you lie to me about that, you lie to me about anything. There's a thing in the courtroom. You tell one lie, they get to assume everything you say is a lie. That ain't the way it works. Don't lie. I'd much rather have somebody tell me the truth, even if it's bad truth. It's fine. Much rather have them do that.
A good rule of thumb. Thank you.
Pardon me?
Good rule of thumb. Thank you.
Yeah, that's worked for me. The last thing on the list is an actual flip that I did a few years back with one of my clients that wanted to get involved in flipping. And so I found him this house way out in Louisa County. It was a 1,460 square foot building in poor condition, and it was a foreclosure, and owned by Aquan Loan Services. And you should have an MLS, should have 2 MLS sheets and a closing statement, a HUD-1 closing statement. So my client bought this property for $58,947. And it had 3 bedrooms and 1.5 baths, and it had a big old family room addition on the left side of it. If you're looking at it, you can see that. So we went in there. It already had a living room, so we remodeled the house and added a master bedroom suite in the left wing with a walk-in closet and another full bath, and stole a little bit of space from that area to enlarge the kitchen. And I was pretty good at estimating those jobs, and I told my client, all right, he bought it. I said, I need $20,000 to do the rehab. And I hit that sucker almost within $100. I mean, I was right on top of it. So we bought it for 58, had a few closing costs, spent $20,000. He put $20,000 in UVA Credit Union and said, it's yours, spend it wisely. I had a checkbook and I wrote all the checks, just like I said I do for, the materials and for the labor guys. So fast forward, we get the thing done, and we put it on the market. We bought it for 50, round figure 60, put 20 in it, so we got 80 grand in it. Put it on the market for 129.9, and a nice young lady that used to work with us here and is doing very well in Louisa County, Ashley Hoffman, was the one that brought me the offer on it. 128.9 with $5,000 worth of concessions. So we accepted that offer and we got the thing closed. And the HUD-1 reads like this. The HUD-1 is similar to the what they now call the closing document, and it shows where all the parties' money went. So shows how much the buyer had to bring to the table and what the amount of his loan was and all that other stuff. And then it shows what my client's commissions were and settlement statements were and what he had to pay the lawyer to close it and all that other stuff. But the one thing that will not go away is cash to seller. Bottom right-hand numbers, the one you always want to look at. the seller walked away with $112,900. And do you remember what I said we had in it? 60 plus 20 is what? 80. So he had 80,000 in it, and they stroked him a check for $112,900. That sounds like $32,900 profit. Not too shabby. As a matter of fact, it was so not too shabby that he wrote me a check besides my commission for another $12,000. So, and we're good friends to this day. He doesn't always listen to me, though. I wish he would listen to me a little more, but he's a very successful stock investor and has 2 prodigy children that are doing extremely well. So I don't tell Kai what to do. Kai's his own man. But that's an example of a deal. And of course, I wanted to give you a good one, and with numbers that you can understand. It's hard to find a $60,000 house now. This was probably done 8-10 years ago now, 2014. But no, it's a good one, and I had all the old MLS information saved, so I kept it. So that's my class for tonight. I kind of did the accelerated version, but I wanted to get it taped and recorded, which we did. And I thank you guys for joining us. And now it's saved for posterity, and other people can get to it. Ruth, nice to see you, though I can't see you, but I can see you're there. And Kate, I'll call you tomorrow probably, and we'll go over these numbers. I notice in this income statement, the guys has included income or interest expense in his numbers. And I guess he's asking like $2 million for this building. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
And one of the things I'm concerned about is a cap rate of 5.75% the right number? And I'll ask Melvin. I assume this is in Waynesboro, Stanton area?
No, this is actually in Roanoke.
In Roanoke? Well, that's a good thing about investment properties. As long as you know that the area is not harshly declining, you know, you don't want to buy in an area where next year it's going to be all slums or something. But short of that, the numbers kind of speak for themselves in investment property a lot more than they do in just single family, you know, buy somebody a house kind of thing. So these numbers will, and
I feel like based off of what you were showing me, I feel like I was getting significantly different numbers from what he sent me,
well,
but I might not be doing it.
He says his adjusted NOI is almost $116,000, and if you divide that by 0.057, you're going to get $2,033,000. So, but what if the going rate down there is 7%? That's going to cut in deeply to what you can pay. So we need to find out what the going cap rate is on multifamily buildings in Roanoke. Once we find that out and verify that these numbers are accurate, which I want to analyze further, then it'll take me a while with a calculator to crunch them and make sure I know what's going on in his accounting, and then I can tell you what it's worth.
Okay.
Not much harder than that. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm going to need a little time analyzing it, and quite frankly, I have something else that I really want to be doing right now, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it now. UVA is playing basketball, and I'm going up Wild Wings to watch the game. So that's my plan.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, guys, thank you for joining me. And now we've got this thing recorded, and you know, future generations can figure this stuff out without me having to be there all the time. Let's call it an evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, gal.